Jake Ludington here at HP Discover, and I'm here with Brian Aker, who is a fellow at HP, and you've kind of been in the open source world for a few years, you could say.
Couple decades at least.
You want to give people a little background about where you come from, and then we'll lead this into how that ties into HP Cloud Services a little bit later.
Sure. So I've been working on open source technology since essentially like before even the term open source actually got coined. So I've worked through like Apache modules up through like helped and work on like MySQL from pretty much the beginning. Worked funded replication and hacked on code myself. Storage engine layer stuff, memcached, gearman, Slashdot. I've been working at open source for a long time, and that, by the way, is part of when HP decided to like go into the public cloud stuff and had picked OpenStack. It became kind of an interesting place to be for me because really like to work on open source and the type of scale that we're talking about, and working on something that is like as seriously as complicated as OpenStack is, and just the concept of like open sourcing a system that is just not a single system but an actual like here's a production system running a large public environment. Within like the open source world, we've only ever open sourced a few of these really like multi-system like scalable back-end systems, and so the opportunity to come and like work on one with a company with resources to do it was definitely exciting.
And so I mean you mentioned things like memcached, which is powering a lot of the caching on the web today, or it's probably safe to say that, and some of these things like gearman. And how has the experience of working on those types of projects made it easier to kind of roll up this high-scale OpenStack solution at HP?
Well, so in my career, I've went back and forth between like shipping software and actually like running and working on services. And so a lot of it is not so much like it is interesting memcached or gearman or even MySQL, but the real thing is how do we deploy it? Like I find software more interesting when it's not just something like we toy with, but when we're actually deploying and making use of it. So like with for instance Slashdot, at the time if you look at like the hardware we used and you also look at like the number of page views and the like what we built, like it's pretty amazing. And a lot of that kind of keyed my interest into like not only like hey it's great open source, but how do we actually like make the stuff work at large scale. We deal with memcached clusters that are, in the tens of thousands in the environment. And we see gearman's one the same size, or like, I talked to somebody here who had 20 petabytes of data in MySQL for what they were storing. I mean, like, it's fun to take these things and write them, but it's even more interesting to actually put them in. And when you like look at all these pieces together and not as single elements, but as something that is a much larger, more interesting system, well, that is OpenStack. So that's kind of how it all like ties together with me.
And one of the things that I keyed in on that you said when we were having a conversation before we started the interview was kind of this idea that open source is great and you can do it on your own, but you can run into these problems where you're trying to implement a whole bunch of disparate open source solutions because of incompatibilities or because of the cloud environment that you're in. And so something like an HP Cloud Services sort of gives you the ability to have a tested version, as it were, of all of those things working together in concert.
Well, I mean, part of it is it enables people like to work on open source and as an example, like I don't always want to be fixing my laptop. Like I work on stuff at a different level than that, so I want a level of stability in what I do in that environment. That's one of the environments that I do not want to like have break on me, because really anytime I'm spending on that, I'm not spending on time working on the stuff I like that I'm really kind of more passionate about. And one of the things about like particularly about open source in this way is that like if you are working on say infrastructure or like being able to use infrastructure as a service where the infrastructure as a service component, in this case like OpenStack Nova, is open source, that the stuff that you're, coding against that's running on HP Cloud is exactly the same thing as anybody else is running. The APIs, software is all the same. So it really does kind of enable like open source developers to work on other sets of problems so they don't necessarily have to solve, everything every morning all the way up the stack. So that's a kind of a nice piece of the enablement in these environments.
So you can kind of pick and choose the pieces that you're passionate about and focus on those and kind of ignore the pieces that are less important to you, because not less important from a business perspective, but less important from a passion standpoint in terms of your development.
Yeah. So let's say, for instance, like you were building some kind of web framework of that you were interested in. Like, you probably don't want to manage the database. Like, that's probably not a very interesting thing to you. Like, I don't want to worry about, like, did I do a backup? Did I get snapshots? Like, I want to test this thing so that, like, replication scale out's occurring. So, an example, like, at HP, we have the relational database as a service. So, basically say, give me a database. I would like it replicated. I would like it backed up this frequency. I would like to have snapshots that I can then test in these kind of like, QA environments and so forth. You can do all that. And the software, which I think we're renaming, is called Red Dwarf. And it is open source. It's the same thing that like HP runs, Rackspace runs it, other companies like run it. Like, it is exactly the same software. So if you don't want to deal with all those managing components pieces, you can just go and work on your web framework and work all, to your heart's content and not worry about that. On the same token, if you actually are interested in that stuff, it is an open source project. You can go and sign up and contribute to your heart's content.
And I'm sure there's context where it makes sense to actively do both, participate in the open source project, and when you want to have a known good configuration, just work with that.
Completely. I've also found that, like, as I work on systems, like when we originally had done Slashdot, like, we were extending MySQL in places to actually, enable what we were doing at that time. In the same case, the nice thing about when you're working on open source, which is, from top to bottom, like, you may not care day one about what's being done with the database. You may just say, I want a database, but you may find a little ways into it, like, I wish this piece could work a little bit better. Like, I wish it would spin it up in a different way or a different flavor or with different sorts of pieces. And well, if you were dealing with proprietary software, you can't make any changes. But nice beauty of like working on open source in this regard is that you can go and contribute, and then since we actually run the open source project ourselves, your contribution, with a little bit of time, goes not only from the open source project back into HP Cloud. So you can make use of your contributions. Like, this is one of the beauties of like open source, is that you can push it in a trunk, everyone will consume it, and you can get it at the end of the day. So it does allow you that when you want to go back and say, maybe like go a little deeper in one particular area to fix a problem, you can do it.
So in terms of HP Cloud Services, there were a few announcements around some new things here at HP Discover. Can you go into those a little bit and kind of how those are simplifying people's lives?
Man, so like the 4 talking points I was supposed to memorize. Well, let me see. The Glance API piece I know that we're doing, so we've enabled people to load their own images that we would actually use into our system. So it's a self-service model. So like, if you don't like one of the distributions we're running, or you want to use one of your own or whatever else, you can actually we've started enabling that through the Glance API, which is the OpenStack API. I think we've also did the bulk upload. We've kind of added that because as customers are coming into the cloud, it'd be great if everybody just had, just generate new data. But the truth is, people actually have, large amounts of data that they sometimes need to get in the cloud. And that's not something you generally want to be just, doing from your, desk computer. It's a little slow. So we actually have bulk upload we've done. I think we've also enabled partner images, but I can't remember the 4th talking point.
That's okay. That sounds like some excellent pieces that are very necessary for anybody doing a cloud deployment.